Welcome to Perfectville, your first place podcast for your Miami Dolphins, part of the BLEAV network, powered by Fanduel. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, Sam Marcoux, your humble host here in the town of Perfectville, running solo for just a little bit. The two-time Hall of Famer, Dr. Christopher Cullen, is on assignment. He's going to be joining us later this week to talk week 2 of preseason. But until then, we're going to talk week 1, the week that was. I do have a guest coming up here in just a little bit, Peter Overzet of fantasylife.com. Very strange, interesting connection to the Miami Dolphins does Peter Overzet have. What do Peter Overzet, Patrick Laird, Tua Tagovailoa, and Sam Marcoux all have in common? You're going to have to listen and tune in to find out. But Peter Overzet's going to be here talking all things Miami Dolphins, what to do, what not to do, the strategy that he thinks you should employ if you are drafting Miami Dolphins players this year. It's a kind of an interesting one, ladies and gentlemen. So Peter's going to be joining us here in just a few. But until then, we got to get to the big splash, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, the big splash, the one story making the biggest waves in Dolphins Nation this week, whether it's a highlight reel play, a sideline spat, or just someone that's got Twitter in full meltdown mode. We're diving in head first, no floaties. And I think the big story here is the fallout, the aftermath, the reaction to week 1 of preseason. The Miami Dolphins against the Chicago Bears. Yes, the game was on Sunday, but it started on Friday with a joint practice. And I think that actually impacted what happened on Sunday for the Miami Dolphins and Chicago Bears to a lesser extent. But let's just get into it, shall we? So the Miami Dolphins fly to Chicago. They have a joint practice with the Bears. The Bears, by all accounts, were extremely physical, tackling when they really shouldn't be tackling, knocking people down, and really just embarrassing the Miami Dolphins offense all day on Friday. So much so that Twitter got into it. The beat writers for the Miami Dolphins were calling foul and throwing the flag on how the Chicago Bears players were interacting with the Miami Dolphins players. It led to a lot of discourse when it came to reactions to those practices. Now, by all accounts, the Miami Dolphins defense looked pretty dang good in that practice. The offense looked pretty dang awful. And I think the biggest story coming out of that was a fight, not against the Dolphins and the Bears, but the Dolphins and the Dolphins. Jordan Brooks gets into it with Tyler Dotson, after Tyler Dotson refused to tackle one of the Chicago Bears players during their scrimmage. Now, if you listen to Teron Armstead, he was there. He broke it up. He's got the full story because he saw the whole thing. Typically in these practices, according to Teron Armstead, when you have these joint practices, you're tagging off. You're not actually tackling the opposing player. It's kind of a gentleman's agreement, unspoken rule that you're not supposed to be tackling that hard. Nobody's trying to get hurt. Everybody's trying to play the game on Sunday and, of course, be healthy for the regular season. The Bears were not having it. The Bears were hitting the Miami Dolphins. They were knocking them down. They were jarring them, at least on the offensive side of the ball. So when it came time for the defense to step up and respond, Tyler Dotson had one of the running backs for the Chicago Bears dead to rights, and he tagged off like gentlemen do. Jordan Brooks didn't like that, got into T-Dot's face. They started arguing and fighting each other. They got pulled apart. Everybody's happy. Everybody's good. It was like two brothers fighting, I think is how they kind of put it out there. But little chippy, not just between the Dolphins and the Bears, but the Dolphins and the Dolphins players. So much so that the report is that Tua Tagovailoa insisted on playing Sunday to Mike McDaniel. Now, he only played one actual series, but it was a good one. He looked good. I'm glad he did it. That is what a leader does. Just like Jordan Brooks is being a leader on the defense, Tua insisting that he's out there with the homies, with the first string, with the offensive line, getting that timing down, getting that rhythm down. Now, Tyreek Hill did not play. Jalen Waddle did not play. Darren Waller did not play. Austin Jackson did not play due to injury. But everyone else was out there for the starting offensive line. You had your starting running back, Devon Achane. You had Tua Tagovailoa, who took that first drive for the Miami Dolphins all the way down as close to a touchdown as you can get. And four running plays later, the Miami Dolphins still had 0 points because Jalen Wright could not punch it in. So Tyreek Hill said, take Devon Achane out, put Jalen Wright in. The Miami Dolphins do that in preseason week 1, and they come up with a giant goose egg for their first drive of the season, preseason, of course. But I'm okay with that because everything up until that point looked like Tua Tagovailoa is supposed to look. He was getting Malik Washington, who had a fantastic game, not only just in punt returns and kick returns, but on 4th and 3, he went 3.5 to 4 yards on an out route, came back, got the ball, secured the catch, and got the first down and kept that drive going. He was doing all the little things that you want a veteran wide receiver to do as a second-year player. So Malik Washington had a very, very strong game. Taj Washington, with Zach Wilson at the helm, had a really, really good game as well. So the Washington Twins, had a pretty good showing for themselves in week 1. Willie Gay Jr. made his, I guess, debut for the Miami Dolphins, hitting somebody other than the Miami Dolphins in training camp. He comes up with a sack in the first drive of the game for the Chicago Bears. They go 3 and out. He was disruptive the entire day, putting pressure on the quarterbacks, making plays happen, knocking balls down, creating interceptions in some cases. So shout out to the secondary who tried to answer for all the question marks that are out there. They knocked a couple balls into the air. They got an interception. They were active. The defensive line looked fantastic. The starting offensive line, a little bit of a mixed bag, but more positive than negative. The left-hand side of that long line with Patrick Paul and Jonas Savayo, blah, blah, blah. Can't even pronounce his last name. That left side looks like they're going to cave some faces in on the defensive line. I look for Devon Achane to run a lot that year, this season, on the left-hand side of the line, and I think that coverage will roll to the left a little bit for Tua Tagovailoa when he is passing the ball as well. So there's some encouraging things on offense. There were some really encouraging things on defense. Unfortunately, the big news out of this game, I think more than anything else, despite the fact that, of course, it was a 24-24 tie, but it was only a tie, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't take my advice last week when I was here with Chris Cullen, and I told you, take the Miami Dolphins on FanDuel, they are plus 2.5 underdogs. Not only did they win, but if you bought in on that, you won as well. So you can check that out on FanDuel. Not only can you get the lines for the games, you can get the over-under, you can get futures, you can get prop bets, you can do anything and everything when it comes to football, fantasy, or real for FanDuel.com. Check it out. FanDuel powering this show and most of the BLEAV Network for the entire 2025-2026 season. Now, that aside, what you can't find on FanDuel was the injury status of Alexander Mattison, who dropped right directly on his head. He ended up having to take an ambulance to the local medical facility there in Chicago, where he had emergency neck surgery, ladies and gentlemen. So number 8 for the Miami Dolphins, down and out for the season. Pretty serious and severe injury for a guy who, by all accounts, was having a fantastic camp. I saw him in person when I was at training camp, and he looked great. He broke off like a 65, what would have been touchdown run when I was there. He looked like he was going to be that goal line running back, the guy who was going to be able to punch it in on 3rd and 1, 4th and goal, whatever the case may be. His season is now done. It does look like he will be able to recover fully. Whether he plays football again or not is irrelevant. What we're really hoping for and rooting for is a fast and healthy recovery for Alexander Mattison. So his season is done. It does look like Devon Achane, Jalen Wright are your number 1 and your number 2. Ollie Gordon, I guess, moves up to number 3. The Miami Dolphins have signed yet another running back. They were working some folks out, including Jamal Williams, but they didn't go with Jamal Williams. They went with Aaron Shamklin, who is kind of a smaller guy, 5'10", 195 pounds, played for the Steelers prior to being with the Miami Dolphins. He fills out the roster. I don't know if he's going to be anything other than a training camp roster body, because you can't have 3 running backs for the rest of training camp and preseason. So if nothing else, I believe Aaron Shamklin, welcome to Perfectville. It'll probably be a short stay for you, but we're glad you're here, and hopefully you can stay healthy. I am concerned about this for the Miami Dolphins, though, because Alexander Mattison, by all intents and purposes, is the veteran. He was the old man in the room for those running backs. You think about it, Devon Achane's going into his 3rd year. Ollie Gordon is a rookie. Jalen Wright is a 2nd-year player. These guys have not had all the reps yet to know and see every scenario that the NFL presents itself. Alexander Mattison has had that. He's had a lot more reps. He's been in the league a long time. He can listen to them. He can be their spokesperson. That now goes away. I do think the Miami Dolphins are going to miss his leadership. I think the Miami Dolphins are going to miss his work ethic. I hope he sticks around the team as best as he can to help them from the sidelines, kind of like how Teron Armstead is now doing for the Miami Dolphins. I would love to see Alexander Mattison stick with this team in some capacity this season and be there, be a mentor, see things that they can't see right away. But I do think this hurts the Miami Dolphins, not just because he's a good player who had played himself onto the team, but because of that veteran presence like I was just talking about. So we'll see what happens. I think the Miami Dolphins' first team offense looked pretty good against the Chicago Bears. Their second team, third team, Zach Wilson, Quinn Ewers, looked like garbage. They got to play better. The game looked way too big for Quinn, and Zach Wilson looked like he was just hanging on the ball for far too long. The offensive line behind the starters did not play well. They were missing blocks. They were just bad. That's all you can say. They were bad. The Miami Dolphins secondary, mixed bag, but I think overall they got to get more playmakers. They got to get somebody here, some sort of veteran that can anchor down that cornerback position, because right now it ain't it. The linebackers look good. The defensive line looks good. I think the Miami Dolphins are going to have more than enough talent at those on the front seven of their defensive line. Somebody's going to get cut that shouldn't be cut because they have that much talent. I don't know who that's going to be. Somebody like a Matt Dickerson, who is fighting for his life to stay on this team, balled out in this game. He opened up some eyes. He raised some eyebrows. Is it going to be enough to pass by some of these other guys? Not sure. But somebody somewhere is going to pick up a talented defensive lineman and or linebacker from the Miami Dolphins when they can't make the final 53 here in a couple of weeks. And that speaks volumes to Anthony Weaver and what he's been able to do to rebuild this front seven for the Miami Dolphins defense. It's going to be scary if these things go as planned. It will mask a little bit of that cornerback and safety room. It'll be a big deodorant if the Miami Dolphins can get pressure with 4 and drop the rest into coverage when they need to. Also, enjoy it now, ladies and gentlemen, because Anthony Weaver, a year from now, will be a head coach somewhere else. He's not going to be here beyond this year. I would be shocked. And if he is, it's because something's gone horribly wrong. Anthony Weaver is a stud. He will be a head coach for somebody, somewhere in the NFL in about a year's time. Mark my words, bank it, come back and visit this next August and see if I'm right or not. Also, speaking of Jalen Wright, speaking of all the Miami Dolphins, fantasy football, we're going to talk to, when we come back from the break, Mr. Peter Overzet of fantasylife.com. You can actually check him out on YouTube at Peter Overzet as well. This guy's got a pretty unique and interesting connection to the Miami Dolphins. He's not a Miami Dolphins fan per se, but he is he's fins up adjacent, I would say. I think that's probably the right thing to do. But we're going to go take a break, and we'll be back right after these words. Now, if you don't want to listen to the ads while I'm taking a break, you could always go to Fanduel.com and take a look at what's coming up for week 2 of preseason. The Miami Dolphins will be against the Detroit Lions. Talk about a physical fest that's going to be. They didn't even go home yet. They actually flew from Chicago to Detroit. They're playing together. They're staying together. They're going to be on the road going from Chicago to Detroit. We're actually going to preview that game with Christopher Cullen, the two-time Hall of Famer, later this week. That's right. You're getting 2 episodes of Perfectville this week, ladies and gentlemen. But until then, we're going to go pay some bills. We're going to go play some ads. We're going to come back. We're going to talk to Peter Overzet of fantasylife.com. And we're back. I hope you enjoyed those commercials. We had those commercials just for you, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Perfectville. We are back here in the town of Perfectville, and it is not me by myself for this segment. I do have a special guest. We have, let's just give him the keys to the city, to the town of Perfectville for this episode and this episode only, Mr. Peter Overzet from fantasylife.com. You can check him out on YouTube on his own page at Peter Overzet. Peter, thank you for joining here. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's very rare that I get to do, team-specific podcasts living in the fantasy world. But if there was one team that I could do a team-specific podcast for, it would have to be the Miami Dolphins. So, yeah, I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for you to be here. So we were talking a little bit off air. I thought maybe you were a closeted Miami Dolphins fan based on all the content that you have centered around the Dolphins, including being featured on the official Miami Dolphins website a couple of years ago. But it has more to do with a former Miami Dolphin than it is the team itself. Tell everybody your connection to the Miami Dolphins in a weird roundabout way, especially with this audience, because the gentleman you're about to ask is a fan favorite for all the citizens of Perfectville.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people watching this know him as the intern, former running back. Patrick Laird, of course, ended up on the Buccaneers for a couple of seasons and has now, hung it up. But way back when in the fantasy world, we're playing DFS, Daily Fantasy Sports, and there was this one week where, people like to say, this is the guy I want to put in my lineup or whatever. And, everybody picks the good players. It makes sense. But Laird was this kind of unheralded running back that was starting to get opportunity because there was a big opening in the Dolphins backfield. And so I just, as a joke, kind of was like, oh, I'm playing Patrick Laird in my DFS lineup. And everyone's like, I got all this pushback of like, oh, that's too fancy, or he's not going to get enough touches. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lean into this. And I am going to talk about Patrick Laird nonstop. And it's the most I've ever tweeted in my life. I think someone counted it up. I did like 150 tweets that week. They were Patrick Laird puns, all of this stuff. And people were like, what is going on? I made a Patrick Laird cake that I ate after the game. And Patrick Laird eventually was like, what is going on? Like his sister started following me and all of this. And, everything kind of snowballed. And he's like, look, I'll do your podcast, my friend Davis Maddock and I, once we win a game. And then they went and beat the, I believe it was the Eagles. Yeah, won that game. So we immediately hit him up. We're like, yay, you said you'd do a podcast with us. So he comes on, do the podcast, and now I've become a friend with him, gotten to hang out with him in real life, gone to a couple Dolphins games when he was playing. And so, yeah, crazy internet story.
It's amazing how this works. So a couple of things. So Patrick Laird, for those that don't know, he was the first person to receive or get a reception from Tua Tagovailoa, the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. So Tua came in. I think he spelled Ryan Fitzpatrick, if I'm not mistaken. And the first pass was to the intern himself, Cake Boy, Patrick Laird. So he goes down in Dolphins infamy for many, many different reasons. And I was sharing this story with you. I do stand-up, comedy, and I was in Portland, Oregon at a place called Harvey's. And in between sets, there's nothing to do, especially during the middle of the day. So I'm at like a Hooters style bar, and I'm sitting there talking to this dude who's just a massive human being sitting next to me. And we're kind of just talking, and he sees that I'm a Dolphins fan because I was wearing a Dolphins hat like I always do. And he goes, "Do you know Patrick Laird?" I'm like, "Well, I know of him. I don't know him." And he called him right then and there. This was his roommate in college. And I had a conversation with Patrick that night. That gentleman actually was on the Baltimore Ravens, came to the show that night. We had a great time. And it's just a small world. Patrick Laird just bringing people together across the country, across, the universe here. He's the one, I guess.
Yeah, just an absolute great dude, and he's going to be very successful in whatever he ends up doing in life. Has a strong business background, and so that's my connection to the Dolphins. So I'll always be fins up with you guys, thanks to Patrick Laird.
Well, we appreciate that. Just remember, we spell it PH ends up at this point, no longer fins up because of lawsuits and everything else. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins from a fantasy standpoint, because I was just reading your article over on fantasylife.com about your 0 running back draft and how much you hated and loathed that process. For those that are uninitiated, what is a 0 running back draft strategy or draft? Can you explain to the ill-informed?
Yeah, a lot of people take it literally. I promise you're not taking 0 running backs. And, this is a strategy that has had some decent success over the years. Hilariously, not last year. Last year was the year of the early running back. All those veterans who changed teams, Barkley, Derrick Henry, Mixon, Jacobs, they all smashed. So not a good year for 0 RB, although there still was some winners. Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving, Chase Brown. There were some cheap guys. But in general, what you're trying to do is capitalize on the chaos of the running back position. These guys who get a ton of touches, they tend to get hurt at a higher clip than other positions. And so the thought is, if you load up on wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks early, and then you draft kind of all the backup running backs, the guys in committees, when injuries, when the chaos of the season, or say a rookie just climbing the depth chart, when those hit, you essentially have this supercharged team because you have all the elite wide receivers and you just got starting running backs, where that kind of change doesn't really happen at the wide receiver position, where it's like, yeah, you could have a third string wide receiver and say, if, Tyreek Hill gets hurt, yeah, like we're going to be excited about Malik Washington, but it doesn't mean we're going to take Malik Washington in the second round. Where It's like, hey, if Bijan Robinson got hurt tomorrow, like Tyler Algier would be like a second round pick. We'd be like, he's the starting running back. And so that the way running back touches are distributed make it possible to kind of play the backup angle.
Yeah, again, when you say it on paper, in theory, I think it makes a lot of sense. The problem is when you have a year like last year where those guys, like you said, just absolutely smashed all year round, you're kind of like, well, crap, now I got nothing but a bunch of bench players that are getting maybe 5, 6, 7 points, depending on your format. It doesn't quite work out. But let's talk about the running backs for the Miami Dolphins, because I don't know if you've heard the news, but Alexander Mattison, the veteran in the group, as we were talking about earlier on the show, went in for emergency neck surgery after the game against the Chicago Bears. He is now done for the season. The Miami Dolphins are now without any sort of true veteran in that locker room. You have Devon Achane, who's obviously going to get the bulk of the carries and the looks out of the backfield in terms of receptions. But then you have Jalen. Look, he's not doing well for me, so I haven't even.
Right.
Hey, thank you, Jalen. I want to say Jalen Warren. I'm like, wrong team. Jalen Wright. Sorry, Miami Dolphins fan. I swear I'm a fan. Jalen Wright is number 2. And then, of course, Ollie Gordon, who looked really, really good and promising against scrubs and people who will be bagging groceries in a couple of weeks. But he ran hard. He ran with authority. He got a reception for 39 yards on top of it. He looks like the kind of guy that maybe in short yardage situations, now that Alexander Mattison is out, might be the guy that they look to for 3rd and goal, 4th and goal, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 type situations. What do you look at beyond Devon Achane? Who is the right play for a deep league when it comes to the Miami Dolphins running back? Is it Jalen Wright because he's RB2, or is it somebody like Ollie Gordon who might come in and vulture a couple of touchdowns throughout the season?
Yeah, I think this Alexander Mattison thing is a pretty big deal. Again, we're talking deep sleepers, but
Right.
if we're gonna dig deep, let's do it right. Because there was rumors from camp that Alexander Mattison was gonna have a goal line role, that he was gonna get in there and vulture some of those touches, and all of a sudden that makes it really hard. It's like, okay, well, even Jalen Wright, if Achane gets injured, sure, he's going to get more touches, but if he's not getting the goal line carries, that's like a pretty big issue for his fantasy value. So
Yeah.
you now remove that, and it sounds awful, the neck injury for Mattison. So I want to make sure I'm not, glossing over the severity of that. But to me, this makes Jalen Wright now the clear, clean handcuff. And there is Ollie Gordon there. I don't want to discount that, but just based on where he was drafted, the type of player he was as a prospect, he's not in the same caliber of pick that Jalen Wright and Devon Achane were when they drafted him. So I do think he's going to be slow played. He didn't enter the game until the end of the third quarter in that first preseason, which means he's got a ways to climb up the depth chart. So to me, this makes Jalen Wright kind of the screaming buy because it's a clear handcuff. If Achane goes down, I think we're getting bell cow Jalen Wright.
So that's good to know because I had my first. I'm only in two. I've cut back. At my peak I was at 6, which I'm sure you're like, wow, why so little? But I'm only in 2 leagues this year. One league, my home league. We just had our draft at my house on Saturday. It is an auction dynasty draft. The shenanigans if you get last place, and we'll talk about it here before I let you go. You don't want to be last. I mean, you might not get first, but you don't want to be last in this league. I got Ollie Gordon for $1. Everyone else is like, who is he? He's clearly a Dolphins player, but nobody knows who he is right now knowing what I know about Alexander Mattison going down, he does go up at least one tick on that chart. I think I have a long-term play here, especially if somebody gets injured like you talked about. But outside of the running back room, who is the play for the Miami Dolphins? Is it an obvious one like Tyreek Hill? Is there a sleeper that you're looking at going, this is the guy that you want to get and you can get him later? What is the play if you're drafting a Miami Dolphin here in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, this offense historically, since Mike McDaniel came to town, has been so heavily concentrated around a set group of skill position players to the point they were okay, letting Johnny Smith go. They're like, hey, Tyreek, Waddle, Achane, like we're going to build the entire thing out of these 3 guys. So it does make it hard to find like really sneaky plays outside of that. I do think 2 names. I do think Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is interesting. He had 9 touchdowns last year. He fits that vertical element there. I think he's just a guy who has a nose for the end zone that can get loose deep. I think Tua will be able to find him. But this isn't the most satisfying answer, but I feel like the Dolphins are going to like move in tandem. Like if Tua is good and stays healthy, I think this entire offense and those 3 core players and the ancillary guys are going to crush. Or I feel like it could all come crumbling to pieces and it's like, I don't want any of them. So this is actually my draft strategy. And if you guys are Dolphins fans, you'll like this. If you're going to take Dolphins, take multiple Dolphins. Because I think if Achane crushes, tack on Waddle, tack on Tua, like the whole rising tide is going to hit. So don't just take one Dolphin. Give me 2 or 3 if you're going down that path.
I love that strategy because I employed that strategy on Saturday. I have Tua as my third quarter. And listen, there was some tequila, there was some shots. The fact that I have 3 quarterbacks is a problem in and of itself, but nonetheless, I have Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes ahead of him, and I'm planning on trading one of them, most likely Patrick. But Tua as a dollar keeper isn't a bad play in my opinion. And I ended up with Tyreek Hill. I ended up with one of my keepers was Devon Achane, and of course I took a flyer to Ollie Gordon. So I am fully vested in the multiple Dolphins strategy because I have to agree with you. I think 2 years ago you could just pick anybody on the Dolphins and you're probably getting points. Last year, crash and burn. So it is a little bit of a fly or die type mentality here. I don't know if you got a chance to see any of the game, but outside of Tua Tagovailoa, to your point, the other 2 quarterbacks did not look very good. I mean, Quinn Ewers looked like John Beck, and that's not a good thing. If you're looking like, somebody named John Beck from about 15 years ago who did not play well and did not last long in the league, the game looked way too big for him in his first rookie, time out there. And Zach Wilson just looked like Zach Wilson. He's holding onto the ball, waiting for, somebody's mom to pop onto the sideline so he can date him. It just did not look like a good recipe for the Miami Dolphins if Tua Tagovailoa goes down, especially I know it's one game in preseason, but it is dependent on Tua. If you got a chance to take a look, are you buying Malik Washington as a possible deep sleeper in terms of a deep draft? Because he did look good, not only kick return and punt return, but he was wide receiver 1, for lack of a better term, in this game, and he was running the right routes. Tua was finding him, and he looked pretty dang good. Is Malik Washington on your radar at all?
He is. I like betting on the younger guys. it's a little hard to read into the usage with Hill, Waddle, and Waller all resting. To me, Malik Washington is kind of the super fragile pick in that he's probably a 0, but if he's not, it's probably because things go south with Tyreek Hill. And you guys would know better than me on like what the hell is going on. And is there like full blown blow up risk here? Because if there is, Malik Washington becomes extremely, extremely interesting as the guy who I think is going to just like plug and play. He's not going to be Tyreek Hill. No one is, but they would ask him to be on the field for basically every possession if Tyreek Hill wasn't out there.
Yeah, we had Cooter Doodle on last week, and she talked about how she just would not draft Tyreek Hill if she could avoid it. And I'm a big Jalen Waddle guy. I have been since he came into the league. I've been at training camp this year. He looks absolutely fantastic. I understand why he didn't play, a couple days ago against the Chicago Bears, but I am a big Jalen Waddle guy. Not everybody is. But let's turn our attention away from the Miami Dolphins for just a second. I want to talk a little bit about strategy. What is the number one, I guess, thing people can do to be better at fantasy football? What is there something, if you could just tell somebody tomorrow, if you just did this, you would be a better fantasy football GM and owner? Is there something out there that people just overlook or ignore that you can point to and say, if you just could update this, you would be better, you would win more games, you would win more money, you would have more fun?
Yeah. I think there's, let me give a boring answer and like a more fun answer. The boring answer is know your league settings. There's so many different convoluted settings these days with half point PPR. You can start up to 3 running backs, or, you can flex a tight end. Like all of that stuff should be shifting your strategy and kind of taking advantage of, I don't want to call them loopholes, but these intricacies of your scoring system that your league mates who are maybe drunk, on tequila at the draft might not be paying attention to. But if I think of a little axiom, one thing I always like to say is quantity or quality, not both. And so like, if you really want to go get an elite quarterback, you want Josh Allen, you want Lamar, like great, but like you're getting quality at that position. Don't waste it on getting a bunch, but if you wait kind of like you did in your draft and you're getting like a third quarterback, that's good. You're going to make up for your lack of quality with a higher quantity options. And so if you think about that for every position, I think it just helps. It's like I start with 2 running backs, like boom, I get Bijan and Jonathan Taylor. Boom, you have high quality running backs. Now chill, you don't need a ton of them. You just need 4 or 5. You're basically saying these guys crush. And now I need to focus my quantity on the positions that I don't have quality at.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of my strategy in getting a couple of top-tier quarterbacks, is that my wide receivers, I do have Tyreek Hill, and I had George Pickens. I've already traded him away, but after that, I wasn't in love with the depth, so I'm hoping I can maybe parlay one of those quarterbacks into another wide receiver that I could, plug and play for the majority of the season. I guess at least that's where I'm thinking. Okay, so that's number one. That's know your league settings, understand the scoring there. Any other advice you could give to anybody listening to this who is playing and partaking in fantasy football?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I notice a lot, so I do a lot of best ball drafts, and, that's where you don't have to manage it and set it. And so you're able to do 1 million drafts over the course of the summer and there's no management. But I assume most people watching this are playing in a home league. You're managing it. You're maybe doing 1 or 2 drafts, like you said. And you want to get off to fast starts in those leagues, right? Where no one wants to be in the hole where they're 0-4. And then it's like, I got to win 7 in a row to make the playoffs. And so I think prioritizing, and I think a lot of drafters do a good job with this, but your starting lineup, like this year, I think there's 3 clear elite tight ends. It's Brock Bowers, it's George Kittle, and it's Trey McBride. In home leagues like that, I really want one of those guys, because that means each week my opponent's probably going to be averaging like 5 to 6 points at tight end from their tight end. Whereas I think those guys I just mentioned can average 12, 13 plus points a game. That's essentially starting each week of your matchup with a 6-point head start at a very valuable position. So that helps me get off to a fast start. Obviously, the running backs who project very well get you off to a fast start. And wide receivers so deep this year. Like 3rd round, you take guys like, Marvin Harrison, like he's fine. He had a pretty disappointing rookie career or rookie start. And then you juxtapose that with like, Josh Downs or Michael Pittman are going in the 8th or 9th. And it's like, those guys aren't even going to project that much differently week 1. So get the running backs, get the elite tight end, get off to a fast start, and you can build depth out through wide receiver.
I feel like you were spying on me last year, because I started my league 0-5. I had to win the rest of my games just to get into the playoffs, where I got absolutely curb stomped in the first round. But I did make it there. But it took a long it was a long journey to get there. But I am trying to take that strategy. So I did trade George Pickens. I also picked up Demario Douglas, who I only got just to block a friend of mine because he was down to $1, and he nominated Demario for $1, and I did too, just to be a jerk. So I didn't really want him, but I traded him for Stephon Diggs and Michael Pittman, which actually I think extends my lineup a little bit, at least in that league. I do want to talk to you about what's the biggest mistake you see fantasy owners make. Is it like me, where you draft too many of your hometown talent, or I'm just getting Miami Dolphins up and down? Or is there something else that people do or don't do that you look at and go, man, that is the classic mistake for fantasy football?
I think outside of like the setting stuff, I do think it's not being aggressive enough. It's funny because you think in like fantasy football, right? It's like, it's fun. Like, yeah, some of us are playing for money, but it's still generally not that much. And yet people are still so scared. Like, people would rather not look like an idiot than to, take a big swing and actually win their league. And if you think about it, it's like 1 out of 12. If your entire league are all solid drafters, you have a 1 in 12 chance to win. You need to be doing things to increase those odds. And I think people play too scared in being aggressive with your selections. And I know that can sound ambiguous, so I'll give you an actionable thing. It's rookies. Rookies represent the biggest asymmetric bet that you can make. Like Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers were stone cold league winners last year. Bucky Irving, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas. And now we have this rookie running back class that I think is going to define the year in fantasy football. It's one of the deeper running back classes. It starts at the top with Genty and Amari and Hampton. Those guys aren't sleepers. Coming out of this weekend, Trevion Henderson and RJ Harvey, everyone knows about them, but it goes deep. Like, I'll toss out a name like Dylan Sampson, who I think is going to be the starting running back for the Browns, because who knows if Judkins is even going to ever play. But this deep running back class and taking stabs on the ambiguous backfields, it might not seem like there's clarity there. That's true. But when things break right, these rookies can just absolutely smash their ADP.
I noticed you accidentally left Ollie Gordon off that list, so we'll go ahead and throw him into that rookie class as well. No, I'm kidding around. We're talking to Peter Overzet. Peter, thank you so much for joining us here. You can find him over at fantasylife.com. Where else can people find you, absorb your content, love you, go get tattoos of their favorite player on the Miami Dolphins, make cakes for their favorite player in at the NFL? Where is it that anyone can find and just consume all things Peter?
Yeah, the best place is at Fantasy Life. We have that free newsletter that drops in your inbox every single day. We're obviously 7 days a week right now in the heart of the season. And our tools now at Fantasy Life, we just did a whole kind of relaunch. We have all of these premium tools, League Sync. So if you just want to put, I say keeping track of your settings, we will actually reorder and re-rank our projections based on your unique settings. So you don't even have to try to do the mental gymnastics of how do I value this guy in 1.5 tight end premium. We do all that for you. So go check it out. Fantasy Life Plus, you can get the tier 2 sub, which will get you the keys to the castle for everything. It's only $8 a month, and you can even get 20% off with promo code Pete. But it is really an awesome hub for all of your research, and I highly recommend checking it out.
That is awesome. I need that because I can't remember my league settings from one to the next. Last thing, and I'm going to let you go because lots of leagues have championships. They have championship belts. You win money, you win a trophy, whatever it is. More and more leagues, I think, are having punishments, and in some cases, brutal punishments. What's the best or worst punishment you have ever seen or experienced, either by yourself or just somebody sending it to you? What's the one where you just put your hands over your face when I can't believe they made that poor person do that? Do you have one of those examples?
I've never got to experience one myself. Maybe my leagues just lack creativity. We generally do a monetary punishment where it's like everyone else's buy-in ends up being less for the league. And if you're last, you have to put a bounty into the pool. So it's like hey, if you're going to stake, like you're going to actually pay up, which has been a very good motivator. You've seen the classic, the IHOP ones, and eat your way out of there. I think, the people having to run a marathon in a specific outfit, that stuff is pretty fun. But I want to hear yours, because it sounds like you had a pretty good one this year.
Yeah, so this is not a PG-13 show. This is a rated R show. So anybody listening to this is not going to be shocked. So Peter, if you need to cover your ears, please do. But we started a tradition last year. Our last place winner, he's a Raiders fan. So we actually had John Gruden roast him. So we wrote the roast. We gave it to John Gruden. He actually recorded it. It is hilarious. We have it. We actually play it multiple times throughout the year because it was that much fun. So much so that this year, a 49ers fan got last place. So we had Bill Romanowski. roast him. And Romo, not as clever as Gruden, as you can imagine. One's a player, one's a coach. They have different skill sets, but Romo went full Bill Romanowski. And if you know Bill Romanowski, you can only imagine what that means. And if you look at what happens when you are a last place winner in our league, every year the winner gets to add to the outfit. So at this point, you're wearing fishnet stockings. You're wearing a cape that says I suck at fantasy football. At one point, the league winner added a chin dildo that you have to wear on your head for the entire draft. He ended up becoming last the next year when that was implemented. So that the joke was on him, quite literally.
Wow.
And then we also have a wheel of doom. So you spin it, it lands on somebody in a player, and then there's a public humiliation that has to happen. So this past year, you have to wear that outfit, and then you're walking up and down a very busy city out here on the West Coast wearing a, honk because I suck at fantasy football for about 20 minutes. So there's a lot that goes into the humiliation ritual in our league if you get last. So again, you can finish first, you can finish 11th. You don't want to finish 12th because it's a bad day.
Yes, the last thing I need is Bill Romanowski making my wardrobe decisions for me.
Yeah, no, that one was a lot of fun. I'll DM you the video. It's quite hilarious. You'll get a kick out of it. But until then, Peter, thank you very much for being here. Again, just tell everybody your YouTube, your Twitter, just get it all out there so you can get more followers, hopefully, and people follow your content.
Yeah. If you want to check out, I mentioned I do a lot of best ball drafts. And so I do this big streaming show every Monday morning, Best Ball Breakfast. It's like 4 hours of straight drafts. But, we're talking about news and then how should players be adapting. So, yeah, that's Peter Overzet YouTube channel. And you can find me on Twitter at Peter Overzet as well. So, yeah, really appreciate you having me, and fins up with a PH.
Fins up with a PH. Peter Overzet, ladies and gentlemen, from fantasylife.com and YouTube at Peter Overzet. Peter, thank you very much for having us, or for being here and joining us, and we'll see you next time. Special thanks to Peter Overzet over at fantasylife.com. We had Cooter Doodle on last week. We've got Peter Overzet this week. Fantasylife.com just holding it down for the Miami Dolphins, the town of Perfectville, and the okayest fantasy league ever. Coming up later on the show this week, of course, the two-time Hall of Famer, Dr. Christopher Cullen, will be in the building. He will be in the town of Perfectville. We're going to get his thoughts on week one for the Miami Dolphins against those Chicago Bears. But more importantly, we're going to preview everything and anything for the Miami Dolphins and the Detroit Lions, week 2 of preseason. This is going to be the quasi-dress rehearsal, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be Tua Tagovailoa. This is going to be Tyreek Hill. This is going to be Jalen Waddle and the rest of the Miami Dolphins offensive all-stars and their rebuilt defensive line, defensive linebackers, and defensive backfield going up against a pretty physical Detroit Lions team who've had their own injury bug going on here, but I'm looking forward to seeing this. This is going to be a black and blue type game. This is where culture and grit and toughness are going to be tested early. In this case, preseason for the Miami Dolphins. We'll preview that. We'll preview just about anything and everything you can for this game when it comes to Fanduel and Fanduel.com. Again, you can find anything and everything that you need for this game and every other game here in the NFL over on Fanduel. You can check the props. You can check the futures. You can check the over, the under. You can just go point blank, money line, whatever it is you want to do, you can do over at Fanduel. And of course, the return of your favorite, my favorite, everybody's favorite, Elite Tweet, Delete Tweet. We're going to do that with Dr. Christopher Cullen here later this week. We're going to be previewing that Lions-Dolphins matchup, the dress rehearsal for the regular season. How much will Tua play? How much will Tyreek play? Is Jalen Waddle going to look like his old self? Is he going to look like a better version of himself? What's this defense going to look like against a live round, high-octane offense that has Jahmyr Gibbs, that has Amon-Ra St. Brown, these big, high-profile pieces? I'll just remember here, on behalf of myself and the two-time Hall of Famer, Dr. Christopher Cullen, the entire BLEAV network, powered by Fanduel, where no one is perfect except us. The only thing left to say is goodbye from Perfectville. Later.